Hello, I'm Darrell Gunter, your host for Leadership with Darrell W. Gunter on WSOU 89.5 FM and streaming on the net at WSOU.net. Well, I am very, very honored and pleased to have as our in-studio guests Miss Sarah Eisner and Mr. Randy Quarterman to discuss their newest book, The Reparations Project, which is published by David Parker's Live Places Publishing. Sarah and Randy, welcome to the program, and thank you for interrupting your day to come on and talk about this really, really great book, The Reparations Project. Before we dive into the book, could you share with our audience a little bit about your background, education, etc.? And let's start with ladies first. Sarah?
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for having us. I'm Sarah Eisner. I was born and raised in Northern California in the Bay Area, but spent every summer in Savannah, Georgia, visiting my mother's parents and other family in the area. I went to UC Santa Barbara for undergraduate school and studied political science. And then I completely changed and went to graduate school at Stanford, which is how I ended up in this area, and studied engineering. So it was the sort of birthing time of Silicon Valley. I kind of thought, oh, tech is happening, and so I better study this. And so I did that and spent about a decade in the tech industry. And then I left that, went back and got a degree in creative writing. So I flipped again to something else. And that is when I started doing a lot of writing and researching about family history. And I began to write essays about race and privilege and class in Silicon Valley, and also how that was both different and the same from what I saw in the South. And I decided to try and look for some of the descendants of those my ancestors had enslaved, to offer some sort of apology or repair. I did not know exactly what that would look like, but I was very, very lucky to find Randy Quarterman when I started that effort, and our friendship began from there.
Wow. Randy?
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me. My background is I was born in, not to give too much away from the book, but I was born in Okinawa, Japan. I was born and raised there till I was 13. My mother's Japanese. My father's Black and from Savannah, Georgia. And I moved to Savannah, Georgia when I was 13. Went to middle school and high school there. I continued on till all the way to 2000, and I joined the military. Served 20 years in the Army and did 4 combat tours of Operation Iraqi Freedom. And in 2020, 2019, I received the email from Sarah. That was my last year before I retired in 2020, not knowing what I was going to do, what my future hold, something bigger than myself. And she gave me that. I did some writing, in not biography or nothing like that, like summaries in the military, but not in this extensive setting. And Sarah gave me that to write my story, write my history, and meeting, David, it just, and Chris Auderley, and they just influenced me to write this book. And it's been a dream come true. And I hope everybody enjoy it.
Wow. All right. So if you could you share with our audience the great history of the Reparations Project and the Quarterman and Keller Fund?
We'll pass it back and forth. It's again, I'll try to condense the story. So essentially, when I met Randy, I found remarkably that his family still owned 10 acres of land that my ancestor had given his ancestor back in 1890. And Randy was starting, as he mentioned, he was coming home, retiring, and he was starting to look into what to do with that land for his family, because the land was owned as heirs property, which is a very complicated and problematic cloudy title, which happens when somebody dies without a will, and then it goes down to all future descendants and becomes very hard to manage, and you don't really have control over this land. So when I met Randy, what was happening was that the county was taking a few acres of that land that they'd had for over 100 years, been paying taxes on, and they were taking that by eminent domain and had claimed, well, because you don't have clear title on this land, you get nothing. We're going to take this and pay you nothing. And so when Randy and I talked and we realized all this was happening, it was a pretty clear lightning bolt moment of like, this is what we could work together to try and do, is clear title on this land so this doesn't happen again. So we started working on that together. We've spent a long time trying to find attorneys that could help the Quarterman family. Long story there, but as we were working on that process, we became very good friends. We had, months and months of talking and about all different topics together. And kind of were like, well, what else could we do with this friendship, and the fact that our families are talking and truth telling about the past and wanting to do some sort of repair. And so long story short, I found that my ancestor who had left some large plot of land to his descendants. Those descendants had donated the land to the Georgia Baptist Foundation, which had turned this into a scholarship fund. I did some research and found out those scholarships were largely or exclusively going to white students, and did not like that. And we thought, well, how can we do something that supports Black education? So we already had the land piece, and we started doing scholarships, first at Spelman, Morehouse, and Clark Atlanta, and then expanded the third realm of work to art and supporting Black artists. So that's where it all started, and then we've had lots of different projects in those three buckets as we've grown to raise money and work together over the past 4 years.
Wow, that's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so I believe Randy, one of your goals is to have a facility that folks can come there to learn and get involved with different community activities. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh yeah. So to add on to what Sarah was saying, she gave the professional part, but the deep part is, without Sarah's heart of addressing, her past and seeing what she can do, contacted me, that openness of humanity in her to say, hey, I'm going to go confront the descendants of the family that my family enslaved, and see, how can I help? And this land issue was part of it, yes. And I always thought of, slaves that was in the plantations. Yes, land was given, but there was numerous families of slaves. That was different families. So my idea was, what would it be used for? Would it just be used for Zeke, or was it used for the community to build off of that, to expand? So the community center was just that idea of what it would look like if we use a land like that to expand and help other Black and African American families without the resources that could get resources, and now try to close that racial wealth gap, which Sarah is really big on, that I end up learning about through her teaching.
Mm-hmm.
But it all comes down to Sarah saying, Randy, I apologize, and where can we go from here? And her biggest question to me was, what does reparation look like to you? And I always said Black education. Well, not Black education, but education, because of the fact that being in rural South and coming from the Japan to Georgia, I wasn't really instilled about going to secondary school. It was always about, okay, graduate high school, get a job, like the bigger thing of really educating yourself wasn't implanted in our family and families around me. You know, it was almost like it was shunned upon. If a kid was very smart, they put him to the side or something like that. You know, so the thing was education and just us acknowledging and knowing, you know, the system to function in it. So with that, we came together, our friendship grew, we started having more discussions about our feelings and thoughts, and my God, you know, Sarah's an amazing human being.
Wow. You know, Sarah, if I recall correctly, that you said that this you guys got together in 2019, started.
Yeah.
You've achieved a lot over. I mean, people think, 5 years is a lot of time. I mean, when you're dealing with such a really tough topic and cultural and history, that's a lot to deal with, and you have achieved so much. What motivated you to say, I want to apologize to Randy and his family, and also I want to go beyond the apology and demonstrate how we can come together and build these reparation tools?
That's a great question. And first I'll say, as you can tell, Randy is incredibly generous, in terms of saying, oh, it all goes back to Sarah. And I would say, well, it all goes back to Randy, being willing to receive my inquiry. And I think that, he's very uniquely positioned in life experiences and heart openness and everything to be able to accept my invitation to even talk about this. And that was really, I feel so lucky. It was never a question for me about whether I would want to offer apology, or some sort of repair. It was more like I knew that needed to happen almost my whole life, but I didn't really even know it could be a thing. And I think when Ta-Nehisi Coates testified about reparations, it brought it back into my mind. When Trump became president, it became very urgent and clear in my mind that this stuff was not over. Not that I ever thought it was, but it was just very obvious to me that I needed to do something, and I was really lucky that at that same point in my life, I had been able to stop working in the tech industry to do some writing, to do some really deep thinking about all of this. And it was just a natural sort of progression of like, oh, I can do something here. Why would I not? And then again, extremely lucky to have the reception I got from Randy. And from there, it just snowballed into like, this guy is so incredible. This new friendship is like life affirming to me, like that somebody would accept me, my apology, he has helped me really reclaim an understanding of my ancestors' humanity even, and to move through the shame that I had surrounding, who they were and what they did. And so it's been absolutely the opposite of what a lot of white people would warn folks against, like, oh, that's going to make you feel guilty, and finding out your history and all the stuff that will shame white children and everything. It's been the opposite for me and my family. It's been moving through that shame and being able to look at the truth and see what we can do to make it better.
Wow, this is great. And Randy, the book, whose idea was the book, and how did it all get started to say, hey, this is great, but now we're gonna put this on paper so it can be in our American libraries?
Yeah, Chris Audley was our moderator for through at UCSB for one of our to tell the reparation story,
Okay.
right, of Sarah and I. And through that, he was like, "You guys got to write a book," And Sarah was like, "Randy, can you do it?" And I was so intimidated of writing it that yeah, it was just a process. But to add on to what Sarah was saying about, just the accepting of her, I like to share this part of my background of being Japanese, and the last 5 years I was being stationed in South Korea, and I would speak to my Japanese family often, and I came in the office speaking Japanese in my native tongue. They didn't know at first that I was half Japanese, but when I came in the office speaking Japanese, they all kind of congregated. It was like 11 of them congregated in the corner of the office and was like looking at me side-eyed, which I didn't understand why they was doing that.
Uh-huh.
So Mr. Kim that sits next to me in my cubicle, he was like, Mr. Quarterman, you're Japanese? So I was like, yeah, my mother's Japanese. So he was like, well, can you please not speak Japanese in the office? So I was like, what's the problem? So he was like, well, do you know the history between Korea and Japan and colonialism? So I was like, no. And, then my mind started working of hearing, my family with these Korean jokes, all that came back in my mind. And on top of that, I knew somewhat what the story was of internally how I felt coming into that space with Koreans, like, yeah, Japan, we ruled the Asia. I had this, I know I did. He made me acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So then when I acknowledged it, I was able to understand now my Black side of what they feel. So it was like two people into one, but I understood that, man, I need to kind of fix this between Mr. Kim and the other workers and myself, even though it wasn't I didn't take part in it, but they feel that way. And how can I earn their trust back? Right. So going through that phase and learning the history of South Korea, going on tours with them, learning about them, making sure I'm not speaking a certain way, things like that was easy for me to accept Sarah in and what she was doing because I felt that. So
Right.
even though you might not have any racism in your bone, but if you even have any superior thoughts, because you're white in a white system, you are a perpetrator of white supremacy in some type of way. It might not be a big way, but you're superior, and no human should be other superior than any other. All should be equal. So the thing is, with that, it was so easy for me to see Sarah's humanity. We both hit it along pretty good. We both hit a stage in our life where our career was over and, seeing what was next. And yes, the 5 years was very short span to get to where we at. But I believe our humanity, our truthfulness, our empathy, in how we see things drove this to this point.
And so, if you had one objective that you would hope that this book would achieve with the reader, what would that objective be?
That's a good question, Daryl. I share the story of, for me, uh, coming into this American space of being a young Black man and being told for the first time at 13 that you're Black, right? Because my father didn't raise me that way. My father raised me as Randy in Japan, you know. But when I came here, my father had to do another tour in Korea for a year before he retired and dropped me off with my grandparents and my family here in Savannah. And I had to fill out a form that has white, Black, and other. That was the only three. I didn't know what that was about. I went to my grandmother and I was like, hey, what do I put here? They want me to fill this out. She said, your daddy Black, you're Black. So that kind of rewired my mind from being Randy to what is Black? Like, I know they're different from what I grew up with, and I'm looking at them a certain type of way, but I didn't feel like I had to fit in it at first. But once I was identified as being Black, now I have to fit this criteria because they telling me I'm them. So I have to be them. But they don't give you instructions. If you're born in it, you already understand these unwritten rules or these unwritten behaviors. You already know it if you're Black, but if you're not Black, you don't know. It's like a white person trying to understand the Black culture. This have to be taught, but I wasn't taught this because they said I already supposed to know it, right?
Right.
So my perspective of being Black was all media. This was 1988, 89, the height of gang violence, the height of crack era, and I thought this is what I'm supposed to be like. Most of my friends is doing this stuff, and not even knowing about the school to prison pipeline, that I'm falling into the trap, and I fell into these traps of being in the street, but somehow uh through who I was internally, it never took me all the way dark path where I can't come out of.
Right.
So somehow this was meant to be. And through the book, I hope they could see, I understand this pipeline, but I hope white people could see this can happen. This is systematically happening to Blacks from birth. Me, it was only 13 from birth, they're happening. So that's what I hope they take away from it.
Sarah, what would you hope that the reader comes away with?
I would say, I mean, what the book does is alternate chapters between Randy and myself and go through decades of our lives. And one thing that was just fascinating as we wrote it was to realize where our lives kind of dovetailed together, but were so drastically different, such as me being in college and protesting the war and getting arrested for it while Randy was going off to fight in it, and I think in reading the book, you really see where it's okay to recognize the differences in where you were and the privileges that you had, compared to other people, and it's okay to talk about them and to recognize them, and it's absolutely fascinating, and it also just shows a very clear path that different white and Black Americans had through the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But it's just, what I'm trying to say is I hope it opens up conversations between white and Black people about our lived experiences, because I think when Randy and I talk about our lived experiences, both in the past, like the book does, and then with our work together, we find that it totally transcends politics, and doesn't even have to get into, we use the word reparations, and that can also, to us, mean personal repair. We don't think that it replaces federal reparations, and we believe strongly in them. And that's not the part we focus on. We focus on the sort of bottom-up interpersonal repair, because we believe that even when federal reparations happens from the top down, there's going to have to be a transformation and understanding and a conversation from the bottom up. So this book is kind of, I hope, an inspiration for those bottom-up discussions about our lived experiences.
Well, I tell you, I see a great movie, a docu-movie happening here, telling these two stories, these two lives interweaving. I'm gonna make sure that my good friend in Hollywood, Pete Chapman, who's done a number of different TV shows and always looking for good material. I send all of the Live Places publishers, people who published a book, over to him. Say, hey, Pete, here's some great material for you. This is great. And
that's great, as long as we can pick who plays us, in the
that's
movie.
right. There you go. This is really good. So what is the next step with your program? The book is coming out, and I hope that you're able to do some type of book tour around the country to talk about this topic.
Well, we just finished doing a lot of touring and talking around with the film that was released from World Channel on PBS, The Cost of Inheritance, which our story is just a part of, but it's a really excellent documentary about interpersonal repair, reparations as a whole, and the need for them. And so we did a lot of talks with that. This is separate, but we did learn how expensive it is to go around on a tour. So part of that is when can we, if we're invited places, we love to go, love to go and talk. We're not a huge foundation, organization, so we have to save our money predominantly for actually going into the education, the land preservation, and the art. And we would be happy to tour around and talk for folks that want to bring us to them.
Well, I'm an adjunct. I'm a adjunct faculty at Seton Hall. I'm an alumni of Seton Hall. And I was just talking to one of the professors who's in the African American Studies program, which they just recently restarted because when I was there, it was active, and then it wasn't active. And sometimes what they'll do, they'll have grants where they'll have funds to bring in speakers such as yourself. So I'll be sure to introduce you to them. We're back on the campus in a couple of weeks. So believe it or not, I mean, when we got to the halfway point, I didn't want to stop the interview because you guys were flowing so good, but we have a couple minutes left. If you wanted to leave any thoughts with our audience, what would those thoughts be about your book, The Reparations Project?
Well, I would say that it was written, first of all, I do have to give a shout out to Randy, who, as he said, he basically wrote a book in 6 months. I had a lot of this material because I've been working on it. So I'm just incredibly impressed that he could do that, and was willing to do it. I think that, it was an absolute pleasure to write with Randy and to learn more about him, even though I've known him for 5 years and we talk all the time. I learned more about his past and why he is the incredible human he is today in reading this book. And I think it's just, you'll be blown away if you read his stories. So yeah, I hope everybody picks it up.
All right. Randy?
Yeah, I just hope they see the humanity in this book of two individuals coming together, of two races and two worlds that's intertwining together to meet one common goal, and that is to have a better world. And share our stories, even being vulnerable, sharing our most intimate part of our lives, so people can see, that it can be done, of just transparency. That's what I want to share with the world, that part, and that it can be better.
And so how can someone get in touch with you? I know you have your website, so please share with us website and other information that you would like to provide to the audience.
Sure. And you can go to reparationsproject.org and you can email us. It comes directly to us if you email, it's on the website, but info at reparationsproject.org. And we answer every single email. And we absolutely love to hear from people, whether it's to tell their story, or ask a question, or see if we want to speak on Zoom or in person. We absolutely love hearing from everyone. So
yeah, we love it.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are here with the authors, Miss Sarah Eisner and Mr. Randy Quarterman, who have just published their book on Lived Places Publishing, and the title of the book is The Reparations Project. And I urge you to go to their website and my apologies for that, and go to their website. And I think there's a place where folks can make a donation as well.
Sure. We do raise money from white people who want to support this effort and redistribute wealth in this way. So that would be absolutely amazing. And there's also a tab on the website that says book, and you can get to the book that way.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for coming on the program, and it's been my honor and pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having us, Derek.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up this week on Leadership with Darrell W. Gunter on WSOU 89.5 FM and streaming on the net at WSU.net. We want to wish you to have a great day, but remember, leadership begins with you.